if you are an athlete or you like sports in general, certainly you have heard at some point about the kinds of things that elite athletes do to get that tiny little edge that will separate them from their competitors, right? We know they've got to eat right, they've got to work out hard all the time, but then what really gets people to get that little extra edge is the mental game. And today, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the mental side of sports performance, and I think you're going to really like it. All right, I'm joined today by Caryn Bird, who has a full-time practice and she works with athletes. This is her thing. This is what she does. I've done it. I've dabbled. I'm a dabbler, but Caryn has done it and gotten really serious about it. And she's got some great stories to tell. So she's going to coach us through and sort of give us the landscape on how this stuff works with really priming athletes to go to higher levels of performance. And we'll even talk about, I think we're probably going to talk about the idea of performance beyond athletics, but we'll get there later. Caryn, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having me, Paul. I always love doing these and talking to you.
I love talking with you. So how long you've done other things, right? You've done hypnotism and other things, but this is a more recent thing. When I say more recent, I guess that's what I'm asking is how recent is it that you've really drilled down on specializing with athletes?
That's a great question. I have been certified in hypnosis and had a practice for 16 years. And of course, as hypnotherapists, we see everyone for,
that's all right.
Weight loss. Sorry about that. Weight loss, smoking, all of that stuff, right? Because when you think of hypnosis, you think of hypnosis for weight loss and smoking and all of that. So I have been practicing for a very long time. For 16 years, I've been seeing athletes and helping athletes reach their peak performance and performance enhancement. Although I would say 5 years ago, I finally niched in with athletes and really started working with athletes to help them to level up.
It's very cool. What kind of people come? I mean, obviously the first simple answer is athletes, but beyond that, like what kind of people come to you? What are your clients like? What kind of clients are you really seeing in the more specific sense?
Oh gosh. So athletes, I work with a lot of youth, high school, collegiate, and then beyond collegiate, the Olympic trial athletes. And those that are actually, I just worked with one that made it to the Olympics. So,
nice.
Yes. So athletes are everywhere, and athletes are amazing because we all know that athletes, they want to do better. They know how to work hard. They're high performers and they know what they want. They're just not sure how to get that mental piece. And so we, as hypnotists and hypnotherapists, can give them that extra piece of the puzzle that goes beyond their physical because they've all put in hundreds of thousands of hours in the physical. They know how to perform their best. And then they have this mind piece that just needs some tweaking and a little bit of mindset training to help them to reach their peak performance.
It's a fascinating thing to me. I mean, again, part of it too, I'm like, oh, I'm getting older, but I think about like, I'm 47, right? So when I was 37 years ago, like you go, yeah, okay, that's almost 4 decades. But still it's not in the history of athletics. It's not that much time. And I remember when I was a kid and all my friends were kids, like it was basically like show up and play, right? And a few kids who just gravitated more to the expression of themselves physically on the field would distance themselves. But even those kids, you know, I think they would just get more playing time, and their higher development came from things like getting more playing time. It took a while for this giant industry to develop and get to a place where it became so big and so competitive that if you really wanted to get more playing time, you had to have a conversation about finding someone like you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Sports have become much, much more competitive at a much younger age. In fact, we are seeing, I mentor other hypnotists and hypnotherapists, and I was just saying that even though high schools are having teams in them still in most of our countries, now there's some countries that don't even have them, but the higher level athletes, even in kindergarten and first grade, are in elite clubs.
Yeah.
And the pressure is so much stronger for these kids that a lot of the high school, especially high school athletes that I see, it's because they're not enjoying the game anymore
Yeah.
because the pressure and the performance pressure is so strong. And then they end up with performance anxiety.
Right. I
Mhm.
remember that when I went to university. When I went to university, I had two football players, D1 AA, but still D1 football players that lived on my floor, and I had two hockey players, and we had one of the most competitive hockey programs in the whole nation. And I remember
Mhm.
talking with all of them, and all of them said some version of, it's not nearly as fun as it used to be. It feels more like I just work this full-time job while I'm going to school. And they would talk about how they just had so much joy for it when they were younger, and
Mhm.
that on game day it was still fun, but the whole rest of the week it was sort of miserable. It was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is hard. It is hard. And that's common. And it's not because they don't like their sport anymore. It's because they don't believe in themselves anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
our job as mindset trainers, really, and hypnotherapists, are to help them to believe in themselves again and then end up enjoying the sport. Because we all know that you enjoy a sport when you do well. When you feel like you're a failure and you're not doing well, it's not enjoyable anymore.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
there's this added thing that I remember from when I worked at a university. You have all this additional pressure that's well intended, but that's coming from parents, because the cost of college education has become so ridiculous that it's sort of like, if we don't get you a scholarship, we don't know if we can afford to put you through school. So there's a whole other layer on top of them then. And talk about taking the fun out of it, right? It's, I got to keep this scholarship, or maybe I can't go to school. You know, I don't want my parents to go into debt. So there must be quite a few. I hadn't even thought about that preparing to talk with you today. It's just coming to me now. There's got to be quite a few peripheral, like anxiety issues and stuff that come out when you talk with these athletes, huh?
They're really, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we all know that anxiety comes from emotions, lower level emotions of not feeling worthy and not feeling confident, not believing in yourselves. So, yes, because we have to remember that athletes that are at that level, that is their identity. And they can't even imagine what life would look like if they were not that basketball player or that soccer player. And there's a lot of pressure around that because that's who they are
Right.
for so many years. They've given so much time and so much effort. And there are a lot of things in the background that are contributing to the performance anxiety, right?
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Gosh.
For sure. Yeah.
All right. I've been saving this. Yogi Berra, the former Yankees catcher, was famous for all these kind of crazy quotes he said. And this one I love. He said, baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical.
Um,
How do you respond to what he's really trying to get at there? We're not gonna dwell on Yogi's math, but
yeah.
but how much do you think it really kind of weighs out at?
You know, I have been pondering that is such a great question. I have been pondering that for years because at first I would say 90-10%. And I was like, maybe it's 80-20%. Like, how do you really measure that, right? It's
Yeah.
not measurable. Although I can tell you that I have seen amazing athletes, but when they lose the mental edge, it doesn't matter how good they are because
Right.
it is so much mental, right?
Yeah.
I just saw a high school senior that had the yips, and that's a baseball player that can't throw anymore.
Yep.
And he knew what it was. He knew it was mental because he knew he had been, an amazing pitcher and catcher. And it was this mental block. And so they come to you saying, I know consciously that it's something in my head and I cannot fix it. It doesn't matter what I do. I've read the books, I watched the YouTube, I can't fix it. And so when you look at something like that, yeah, it's 90% mental for sure. And that's what our job is, right? Is to help them, reframe, right? Switch the pattern and then change the blueprint, because that's what's happening is the blueprint in their mind is that they're throwing, they're missing their target, but we can help them change that blueprint so they get to be back to that place of what does it look like when you play the perfect game.
Yeah, very cool. I had early on in my career, one of my best friends from high school was a high-level AAU baseball coach, and he sent me a young man who had like the fielding version of the yips. Like it could be he was a shortstop, star player, and he had you could hit him the most routine ground ball once he developed the problem, and it was gonna pop off every time, and he was just losing his mind. And it was so cool to see once we cleared that, his level of focus, because he was really dedicated. As you've said, these athletes are so dedicated to getting their results. He did everything I asked him to do, and he got so good at the hypnosis that his focus, we never even talked about hitting. And his first game back after he did his hypnosis sessions, he hit the first home run of his AAU career because he was so locked in. And I was like, yeah, I meant for that to happen. Like
I subconsciously planted that. It's like we used to talk about commercials and how commercials are like brainwashing you.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. But here's the thing though, is he learned all of those techniques that he can use. He learned it for his throwing, but he also learned how powerful that mind is, right? Yeah. So we probably use those same techniques to to make a home run, because whatever our mind believes and sees, our body it just follows suit, right? So when he imagined and visualized himself hitting a home run, that's when it happens.
Yeah. Do you get involved with coaches, or do you stay away from coaches?
I love to get involved with coaches because coaches are a huge part of an athlete's confidence. It depends how the coaches are talking to the athletes, right? Are they a yeller? Are they breaking them down? Are they telling them, don't do this, don't do that, because that's what they're hearing? As opposed to like, do this, do that, just like when we work with kids. But yes, coaches, I don't individually work with coaches, although I have a lot of relationships with coaches, which is why I see so many athletes, because the coaches refer also the athletes,
right?
Because they want their athletes to be their best, right?
Of course.
So, and I have done some clinics with coaches also.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
How do they tend to, when you get more than one of them in a room, there must always be some that, even though they're there, are sort of poo-pooing it.
I don't hear that often. Although,
not to your face.
They're not going to tell me.
Yeah.
Although, a lot of coaches know about visualizations, know about positive affirmations. And so really it's stuff that they've learned as they were an athlete themselves. And now we just get to help reaffirm that. We get to remind them how important it is. And then I find that the coaches start to work with their athletes more on visualizations and affirmations. And so they're very receptive, really. Most coaches are very receptive.
Yeah. Well, and again, any success that their athletes achieve is their success too, right? So why wouldn't they be invested in getting them to do as well as they possibly can? So that makes sense.
Yeah, true. And the other thing that coaches love, and I've worked with a lot of teams and coaches on, is teamwork. Because there are challenges within teams, personalities, and not always working together, and how together everyone achieves more. And that is something that the coaches want me to work on often is, hey, can you work with our team on better teamwork?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. What resources or what figures really helped you get to a place where you could do a better job of helping these athletes? Like, where were your big, I learned so much from this, or I learned so much from this person? Like, tell me more about that.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Well, I have three sons that were elite athletes. So that helped because I was able to watch them and see what mental toughness was. I had a lot of coaches that would have me in to speak in their teams. But to be honest, I would say my son that just passed away a year ago was probably one of my biggest um, advocates when it came to learning about athletes,
Yeah.
because he was so incredibly mentally tough
Yeah.
that I would ask him questions like, I'll take the credit for being a good mom, and that I gave you confidence, I helped you with confidence, but really in the end, he had this unstoppable, undeniable confidence when he wrestled.
Yeah.
And I would ask him, like, what are you doing? Like, what are the techniques he's using? And he would just come up with these crazy ideas, like switching and seeing himself as an apex. And, he won his state tournament with a broken thumb. He had pulled the ligament right off it in his semifinal match, went into the final match, was down by 8 points. And with wrestling, it's a lot of grip.
Yeah.
And he still came out 8 points, which is unheard of in wrestling.
Wow.
And it was those things that, as I watched, helped me to understand, what does it mean when you have an uncontrollable? How do you get through that? What do you do when you step on the mat or into the game to get in the zone? And so there was a lot of pieces. And then he went to the Olympic Training Center and brought home a psychology manual on mental toughness from the Olympic Training Center. And there was just all these pieces that I had put together in the last 16 years that created this program that I now use with athletes.
That's super cool. Wrestlers,
Yeah.
man. I never wrestled, but I had friends that were wrestlers. And when I first got out of college, I was an English teacher, and the school that I taught at had a wrestling program. And I actually coached soccer, and I had wrestlers, because they don't wrestle in the fall out here on the East Coast. I don't know about the rest of the country, but that's a winter sport here on the East Coast. And, in New England. And so I had these soccer players they were really wrestlers who wanted to get in shape. It was like their pre-training, right? They wanted to be getting in shape. So they weren't the most talented soccer players, but they were such hard workers. They were so crazy. Like, their work rate was unbelievable. And this, again, I taught like 22 years ago at this point. And I still remember this kid who was just an awesome wrestler. And this one day the other team stole the ball from us. They were on a breakout, and he sprinted down the field. And as he sprinted down the field, one of the other kids from the other team was running alongside of him and totally accidentally clipped his heel. So basically tripped him without meaning to. And he was so athletic from wrestling. And I know they used to do this. I don't know what they're called. You'd know probably, but they used to do that drill where they'd be like jogging in place super, super fast. And then they just hit the deck and pop right back up.
Yeah.
And all the times to do that, he was at a full sprint on the soccer field, got tripped, and used that move he had done so many times. And it seemed like it was perfectly in stride, was back up and kept sprinting. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
It is amazing. I've heard the quote many times, is after you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. And there's part of me that does believe that, as I saw my boys go through it.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Yeah. But
so cool. So let's shift just a little bit. And I want to talk to you about the sort of the other side of what you just talked about is, so when athletes come to you and they're struggling, there must be some common themes about not just what the struggles are, but what's really driving the struggles. Can you talk to me in the audience a little bit about that? Like, what are the core themes that come up again that are really at the root of athletes not performing where they want to be?
We spoke about this a little bit, but one of the big things is losing the joy in the sport again. And I have seen many, many athletes that will come in here, swimmers, basketball players, most sports, and a good handful of them, once we get into talking about what's going on with them, will be forthright and say, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. And then that's a piece of those are negative feelings, right? Those are questioning yourself. When you get to that space, you don't even know which ends up.
Yeah.
So there is that, right? Is I don't even enjoy it anymore. And the reason they don't enjoy it anymore is because they used to be so good. They were top, athlete on their team. They were the top athlete for 3-4 years, and they lost their mental edge.
Yeah.
And now they can't reach their best times. They're not making the baskets. They can't have the goals. They're not making goals. And so they start to question themselves.
Yeah.
And then they start to say, this isn't fun anymore. Am I good? And I'm so frustrated. So that's the second piece, is the frustration level, where I've seen Olympic athletes, adult athletes, high school, college athletes that will cry because they're so frustrated,
Yeah.
knowing they have the physical ability, that they have done this for hundreds of thousands of hours, and there's something missing and they don't know what it is. So there's the no joy, there's the frustration of it anymore. And then there's athletes that have mental blocks, and the mental block is stopping them from performing something that they've done before, like like a gymnast. So we have a gymnast that has done a handspring back tuck back layout for 5 years. And one thing happened and they can't do it anymore. And it doesn't matter what they do, but they go to run and do their pass and they literally freeze.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's that block of, what is going on with me? I know I can do it. Physically, I'm fine. I tell myself I'm okay. And for some crazy reason, their body won't respond to what their mind is telling them.
Yeah.
And we get to make that connection and help them make a connection. So there's a lot of things that they present with, but they're, like you said, there's a package that many of them present with, and it's the performance anxiety, the not believing in themselves, the not enjoying anymore, and then the blocks.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the injuries, right? So a lot of athletes that have injuries, it starts to mess with their mental game. And it's about realizing that after an injury, a lot of times your body is stronger than even before the injury, with the healing time and the physical therapy, and then reframing that, like switching that on for them. Mm-hmm.
Have you read Carol Dweck's book on mindset?
I don't think so. Mm-mm.
I think that's such a great, you'd love it. And it wouldn't necessarily teach you anything new, but it would be so in alignment with everything you're saying. And for folks who are watching this episode or listening to this episode, and if you've got, a loved one who's an athlete, there's a really important, that's a great book. It's not, it's an easy read. Anyone can read it. Carol Dweck, pretty much devoted her whole career to studying mindset. Why do some people outperform others in all walks of life? And what she eventually came up with was this really simple theory. And she said, basically, it's the old classic, there's two kinds of people. And that's what she did. She said, there's two kinds of people. There's people that have growth mindsets, and there's people that have fixed mindsets. And this goes all the way back to several minutes ago when you talked about the idea of athletes work it into their identity. And she said, when your identity is built around being good at something, like, so when you have parents and coaches telling you from a very early age, you're so good at X, then you end up adopting that into your identity. And so then when you have a day where you're not good at X, it's such a huge, like, implosion potential opportunity, because what then happens is you go, well, who am I if I'm not good at this? Everyone goes, where she said, if what the adults in the room keep telling you is you're a hard worker, you're a good learner, if it's more about process oriented stuff, you can do these skills, you can have these values or these virtues. Those people, when they're confronted with a bad day, then default to, well, I just need to keep problem solving, or I just need to keep learning, or I just need to keep doing the thing I'm good at doing, and I'll figure it out eventually. And they don't have that implosion, and they do vastly better. And,
yeah. And that's an interesting concept, because we talk about that even with parenting in general, is, as adults, if you're always told as a child that you're so beautiful, you're so beautiful, you're so handsome, and then you grow up and you don't believe you're beautiful, or you're, presenting as my main attribute is that I am beautiful,
Right.
then there's that piece of, if you're not beautiful, then you're not worthy, right?
Right.
It's kind of a very similar concept as a parent, is more about, yeah, you're a hard worker, you always do what I ask, you're responsible, because that is always available to us.
Right. We
Yeah.
can keep pursuing our values and our skill sets, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a perfect segue for let's keep going with this a little bit. So have you worked with non-athletes on other aspects of performance?
Absolutely. So the same similar process that we use with athletes, with any high performers.
Yeah.
I saw an orchestra, a girl that was in an orchestra in the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, and performance anxiety. She was doing great, and she started not playing so well, and that anxiety starts to take over. They're not, they can't focus when they're all worked up. And so, yes, with that drama, singing, when you start to get nervous, the voice cracks. So there's that. And then even executives and high academia, they get to that space of starting to question themselves and fear, right? So when you really think about it, and you know this, Paul, fear holds so many of us back.
Yeah.
Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of not being good enough. There's that fear, right? And any high performer that wants to get to another level is eventually going to get to a space of, are you going to push through the fear, or are you going to let it hold you back? And many times that just learning the mental tools of what does it take to cross that line, to step over that fear, is what you need to level up. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
How many, like, ballpark, how many tools would you say total that you don't do 100% hypnosis for all this stuff? You must have more than one tool in your tool bag.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's a lot of different techniques and tactics that we use. So, reframing things, writing affirmations, important. I teach thought stopping. What happens how do you pay attention to the thoughts in your head? Because the thoughts in our head create our performance, right? What's going on in here, our body responds to. So we talk about thought stopping, carrying yourself like a champion. What does it look like? What is that visualization of your perfect game? And there's all of those pieces. So mindset training.
Yep.
And then like I tell my clients, it's mindset training with the added benefit of hypnosis to solidify the work we're doing, because that conscious mind isn't blocking the new techniques, the new tools. We can solidify that in the subconscious mind. What is that picture? What does that look like? So yeah, so there's a lot of different NLPs, and sometimes we do tapping to get rid of some anxiety. So yeah, a lot of different tools that we use.
What is it that you really like about using hypnosis? I know you just talked about it getting past the blocks, but what are the other, like, is it faster, or is it, I don't know, what other qualities would you say hypnosis has that sort of make it more suited some of the times?
What I love about hypnosis is, like I tell everyone, we'll write a statement that says, I get 4 home runs this season, right? I keep speaking in baseball terms because I'm seeing a lot of baseball players right now.
It's that time
just
of
in my
year.
head. So let's say they write, I get 4 home runs. And I'll ask them what their goals are, and they'll say, well, 2 home runs. And, do you think 2 home runs is a good idea? Do you think you can get 4? Are you selling yourself short? Let's stretchy, right? Stretchy but attainable is what we want to set. And so they will set 4 home runs. Well, when you're in the waking state, that conscious mind, as we know, wants to block things, second guess, criticize, critique. They'll look at that 4 home runs and they'll be like, I am never going to get 4 home runs this year, right? That's how our conscious mind thinks. But in the hypnotic state, where that conscious mind is at rest, we can solidify 4 home runs. And when you can really believe it and declare it, when you've declared it and you see it, you don't question it anymore. And we can create blueprints in that subconscious mind, because what happens is we have a tendency to replay the last time we didn't do so well, right? The last time that we missed the ball, the last time that we struck out. And so last time that we lost a match, whatever it is. And then in the hypnotic state, that conscious mind is at rest, so we can create new blueprints in the subconscious and really solidify it, so that when you get in the zone, and we all know what getting in the zone is that place of peak performance, right? That place of being in the emotional state of nothing else matters. When you can get in the zone, that blueprint is going to pop up. And it's easier in the hypnotic state, as you know, because the conscious mind isn't blocking it, to create that blueprint of what does that look like. And now that's where we're going, instead of the old way, instead of the time you didn't do so well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. The last thing I want to talk to you about is, and I want to, and you can tell I want to be careful about my words, because I know that sports help so many kids. And I know that sports, even when adults, right? There are men and women who play in men's softball leagues and women's soccer leagues. And, there are adults who are connecting with other human beings and getting the value of that through sports. And I definitely, on the broader view, I'm like, sports are good, right? But we also know that because it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's so much riding on it for some of these young people, there's sort of a dark underbelly to sports as well. And I would appreciate any of your thoughts about what you've seen with that, and what you think maybe we can do about that. Because the biggest thing I saw when I was working at the university, and it was a very simple thing, and it wasn't so much dark as sad, is when families were letting their kids grab that identity of being an athlete early on, pursuing it through their elementary school years, junior high, high school, and then they became D1 athletes, and they'd play in college. But so few of them are ever going to go pro. There was always a termination point where they would effectively go, I'm not an athlete anymore, so who am I? And it would be really traumatic for some of them. And I think there's things like that doesn't seem like they get talked about a lot, and so I'm just wondering, like, what's the stuff that you see that kind of gives you pause, and that you think maybe we need to have more of a broader conversation about culturally, or a campaign to address?
That is such a great question. I don't know that I have the answer to it, although I have seen numerous collegiate athletes that have finished their collegiate career and not sure where to go with it, not sure who they are. And that is a whole nother bag of tricks, right? We get to reestablish who they are, what their identity is when they're not athletes anymore. I don't necessarily know the answer to it, because I have to admit, like, being the parent of an athlete and my older son having a full scholarship in college as a wrestler, I know what that's like, to encourage them. Hey, you're so good. Why would you not go for a scholarship, right? Yeah. And then also having a second one that injured his back, and then did go through a big identity crisis when he could no longer play the sport. So like you said, I think more of it, and that's what we can do too as hypnotists and hypnotherapists, is we can work with them about what does your life look like when you aren't the collegiate athlete anymore, right? Because they don't even know how to visualize that. They don't even know where to go with that.
Right.
So as parents, right, and supporters, it's important that we can help them see what does life look like, and create and paint a picture of how successful they are and what got them to be so successful. And they still have all of those attributes. That's who they are. Like, they are going to be successful for the rest of their lives because of the everything that they've established to get to where they are. They just don't look at it like that, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think again, right? We want all human beings to be as healthy and fulfilled as they can be. And so I think, you know, it's like if this thing that brings them so much is framed to them in a way that eventually it comes to an end, and that causes a sort of like a life crisis for them, you go, well, that's great that it did everything wonderful up until here, but now we got to get you through the next 60 years of your life. You know, like, what do you do? It just, you know, I think it's just, for me, I just want people to be happy. So I can't help but think about that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, it is a big deal. It is a big deal for a lot of collegiate athletes that aren't sure where they're going next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we're out of time, but this has been so wonderful. And I want to make sure that people, if they're intrigued by what you've talked about, and if maybe they want to have a follow-up conversation with you, what's a good way for people to get in touch with you after they catch this episode?
Super easy. The name of my business is Win with Hypnosis. And my website is simply winwithhypnosis.com. There's a free audio on there on the first page for athletic success. And then there's also in one of the tabs a free audio for relaxation hypnosis. And so anyone that wants to get in touch with me can hop on there. My email's on there, and download that audio on athletic success.
Awesome. For sure. Awesome. Caryn, thank you so much for making time for me. I always love talking with you, and I'm grateful for you sharing your time.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It was great.